For years, many have considered soundbars a gateway to get more people into traditional home theaters. After all, it's almost impossible to find a traditional home theater brand that doesn't also make a soundbar. As each year passes, though, soundbars have gotten convincingly better at giving consumers that traditional home theater-like experience without the hassle and expense. So is the idea that soundbars lead consumers to buy traditional home theaters still even valid? Well, JBL thinks so. Their stylish new Stage 2 speakers and MA710 receivers are out to sway you over to the dark side. Since JBL markets this new line of products together, encouraging new enthusiasts to make the leap to a more separate-like system, one that won't overwhelm them with too much hassle or technical jargon or features they're never going to use, that's exactly how I'm going to review this system. Starting with the brains of the operation, the JBL MA710, the middle child of JBL's new receiver lineup, which includes 4 other receivers. All 5 AVRs look very similar and are separated mainly by power and just number of channels, with the more expensive MA710 and 9100 HP also getting a better display. They're all available in a very sleek black or white chassis. Sit on your sofa and squint a little bit, and you may even think that you're looking at one of, say, Musical Fidelity's amps. Just don't expect the same build quality. Rated at 110 watts per channel into 8 ohms with 2 channels driven, this 7.2 channel Dolby Vision and Atmos capable receiver is surprisingly lightweight, and that's thanks to its Class D amplifier design. Power increases to 160 watts into 4 ohms. Again, that's with 2 channels driven. Like many receiver manufacturers, JBL does not say what to expect from the 710 when all channels are driven, but it's probably nowhere near 110 watts. The 710 has 6 total HDMI inputs, including 3 that are 2.1 and support 8K and 4K 120 signals for gaming features such as VRR, ALLM, and quick frame transport, as well as 3 non-2.1 inputs that accept signals up to 4K 60. There is an HDMI monitor out that is ARC compatible, allowing for Dolby Atmos and other signals to be passed from your TV to the JBL. Since the 710 is aimed at first-time users, input options are limited to a single optical and coaxial digital input that feeds into the receiver's internal DAC. There are 2 analog inputs and a basic moving magnet phono preamp to play records. You get dual subwoofer outs, though they are not independent. But seeing as how this is for newbies, I don't think they're going to mind. To keep those targeted soundbar users happy, there's Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, AirPlay 2, Chromecast, and support for music services like Spotify, Tidal, and internet radio, most of which are going to be accessible through the JBL Premium Audio app. To complete this home theater system, JBL sent a pair of their brand new Stage 260F tower speakers, 250B bookshelf speakers, a 245C center, and a 200-piece subwoofer in their latte finish. This new design reminds me a little bit of Bowers & Wilkins' 600 series finish. I appreciate the style choices the JBL team made with their new Stage series. I just wish the build quality was as deserving of their more style-forward approach. The weight, construction, and materials used were disappointing, definitely of lower quality considering their asking price. Now, doing most of the heavy lifting are the 2 Stage 260F tower speakers, a 2.5-way design that utilizes 2 6.5-inch woofers mated to a 1-inch aluminum dome tweeter that rests inside JBL's HDI waveguide. Sensitivity is rated at 90 dB into a nominal 6 ohms, which is good for a reported response of 40 Hz to 25 kHz. The 250B bookshelf speakers use a slightly smaller woofer at 5.25 inches, though they have the same tweeter and waveguide as the tower. Sensitivity, as you might expect, drops a bit to 86 dB, though they maintain their 6 ohm rating, same as the towers. The Stage 250 bookshelf speaker output is only rated down to 50 Hz, and this is not a big shocker given their size, though the treble extension is the same at 25 kHz. The 245C center has a nice low-profile design that relies on 4 4.5-inch woofers mated to the same tweeter and waveguide as the other Stage 2 speakers for a reported response of 55 Hz to 25 kHz. Sensitivity is stated to be 91 dB, though impedance remains unchanged. The Stage 200-piece subwoofer, it uses a 10-inch driver powered by a 150-watt RMS internal amplifier that JBL states is good for a frequency response of 28 Hz to 150 Hz. Now, since JBL is positioning this system as an alternative or a step up from a soundbar, I expected setting up this system to be a lot more user-friendly. Now, connecting the JBL speakers and our clipped-in ceiling speakers to the 710's binding post for a 5.1.2 Dolby Atmos configuration was easy enough. The rest of the setup, though, wasn't what I would call plug and play. Seeing as how Samsung is JBL's parent company and they're known for their super easy to use soundbars, I was actually surprised by how outdated the 710's on-screen menu and included remote was. Yes, the MA710, it has an app, but its primary function is getting the receiver onto your network and interacting with streaming services, not setting up the actual receiver. To do that, you must use the less than intuitive on-screen menus that are pretty slow to respond to remote commands. If you connect your speakers, subwoofer, source components, and TV to the 710 and use its default settings, yes, you are going to get picture and sound. However, the 710's default setting is for small speakers in a room roughly 10 by 12 feet in size, and maybe that is the average room size of JBL's targeted customer, but if that's not the case for you, you're likely in for a disappointing experience. If you are brand new to home theater separates, you may not know to look out for settings like this. And while the 710 has room EQ, which I'm going to get to in just a second, it doesn't set parameters like distance, levels, or even speaker type inside the 710. So you have to do all of this manually for best results. I doubt I have to tell you what a pain this is to do, especially considering that other receivers, even ones in this price point, can do a lot of this for you automatically. A handy tip for anyone with this receiver is to grab a laser measuring tape and an SPL meter, which I'm going to link to a few in the description. Now, using these, I was able to configure the JBL stage speakers to fit my room and supposedly level match them with our Klipsch in-ceiling speakers that I had serving as surround and Atmos channels. Another pro tip is that you're going to need to go inside the menu to activate it and tell the receiver what type of Atmos speaker system you want to use. The default speaker configuration isn't Atmos at all, it's 7.1. If you don't make these changes, you may never actually hear your Atmos speakers properly. Now, after all of that was done, I tried out JBL's Auto EQ solution, Easy Set EQ. If you caught our Canvas speaker review a couple of weeks ago, you might recognize the name. While the 710 uses the same app as Canvas, its implementation is nowhere near as smooth. One thing I sure wasn't expecting was having to download a separate app just to perform EQ. Easy Set EQ, it is not built into the 710 or even the JBL Premium app. It is its own thing. Now, iPhone users, you're going to have an easier time running EQ on the 710. Android users, though, you are urged to invest in a third-party microphone from Dayton Audio in order to get best results. I don't know, maybe Gen Z is used to needing an app for everything, but I bet even they've already boxed the system back up and ordered an Amazon pickup. For those who have that never quit attitude, to perform EQ, you'll need to open up the Easy Set app and then walk around your room, waving your phone around while a set of test tones play so that the receiver's Bluetooth connection can calibrate your front, center, and surround speakers. The reason this EQ procedure on the 710 is weird is because most AV receivers that have auto EQ, they come with a small microphone that you use to perform the auto correction procedure. Remember that most AV receivers also walk you through this process, going step by step on your TV screen. None of the JBL receivers do this. This means that you'll need to take separate measurements for each pair of speakers, your front two speakers with or without the subwoofer, your surrounds, and center using your phone and the Easy Set EQ app. I'm not sure why JBL decided to go this route when a more straightforward and easier to use EQ solution like even Odyssey exists. Yeah, Easy EQ, it's a free solution, and maybe that helped keep the cost of the MA710 down a bit, but it's anything but easy, and when targeting first-time customers, it's just not the solution I would have chosen. Now, JBL offers two receivers in this series that support Dirac, but taking a page out of the Marantz playbook, you're gonna have to pay extra for Dirac. Yes, these receivers come with more channels and power, so of course they are gonna be more expensive. But what I don't understand is why JBL didn't include Dirac with the entire line. Instead, they made it more confusing and actually harder to carry out the EQ process on their less expensive models that are, let's face it, more likely to be purchased by first-time users. Now, JBL could counter that first-time users likely aren't going to use EQ at all, but considering mass-market soundbars like the Sonos Arc and the Q-Series bars from JBL's parent company Samsung, they have EQ that is very easy to carry out. Why not co-opt some of that tech, especially if the goal is to create an alternative that's going to steal market share of the soundbar customer you're after? When it comes to the overall sound quality of this JBL speaker-receiver combo, one word comes to mind: brash. The pairing of the Stage 2 speakers with the MA710 receiver packs a punch, but has very little subtlety. Even at lower volumes, I found that listener fatigue sets in pretty quick. The upper mid-range and lower treble frequencies, they do their best to mask the chesty and resonant bass frequencies, but even this isn't enough to combat what I assume is just a lack of bracing inside the speakers. And while the in-room measurements indicate a mostly linear response, the speaker does not roll off until well after 10 kilohertz, when it just completely falls off a cliff. Factor in a noticeable boost in bass between 140 hertz, along with another bump in the lower mid-range, and you start to understand where the measurements and the actual listening experience are at odds. This isn't your typical V-shaped response per se, but in person, it definitely gives you that impression. But compared to the previous stage series, the lower and upper frequencies are actually slightly more pronounced. Though the older stage speakers, they had their flaws, I prefer them over the new version. The JBL speakers, they remind me of Klipsch's reference series mixed with Emotiva's new Air Motive line. Now, unlike Klipsch's RP line, I've found the reference line to be overbearing, chesty, and resonant down low, and the Air Motive speakers just too forceful and in your face up top. For me, the Stage 2 speakers are nearly a perfect blend of those two speakers, and I gotta say, I'm not a fan. I actually found it challenging to get through demo scenes, let alone full movies, TV shows, or broadcasts, unless the volume was set really low. I'm talking nothing peaking higher than about 65 to maybe 70 dB in room. Anything higher than that, and the sheer force of this system caused listener fatigue, even headaches for me. Demoing the Rogue Wave scene from the film Poseidon or the attack on Pearl Harbor from Pearl Harbor with peaks hitting 88 dB in room, it felt like I was cresting 100 dB plus. The sound was just very shouty and chaotic, lacking any real focus in terms of placement and accuracy. And incorporating our Klipsch in-ceiling speakers is typically easy peasy, but not so with the JBL system. It's not uncommon for me to set their volume to -3 dB below the front left and right speakers. I'm not suggesting that everyone do this or that this is the quote right way to home theater, but for me, it's just something that I like to do. In the 710's Dolby Surround mode, I found I needed to back off the surround and overhead Atmos channels more than 6 dB to get them to sit in better alignment with the mains. And even then, depending on the source material, I often heard sounds behind me with greater clarity than from in the front. Turning on virtualization made the imbalance between the surround sound and main channels even more noticeable. Now, switching the surround mode to DTS, that had the opposite effect, and it sucked all the life and volume out of everything, resulting in my having to play roulette with the volume control. And before you shout, it sounds like you have a bad unit, I want you to know that I reset the whole system more than once, and I made sure that the firmware was up to date and even verified my results using third-party equipment like Room EQ Wizard and my UMic 1. I compared the 710 against other receivers like the Onkyo RZ30, which proved to be a better match for the JBL speakers, resulting in a better, more nuanced and intelligible presentation. I even found that with Dirac, I could add a touch of refinement to the JBL speakers and make them a little bit more enjoyable for longer periods. However, on their own or when driven by the MA710, the stage speakers lack intelligibility and just overall coherence. And since I don't suspect we'll be doing an unplugged following this review, Christy wanted me to express that these are among the least intelligible speakers that she's experienced. She had a lot of difficulty understanding dialogue no matter what we were watching. So even with the help of a different receiver, we're both having a pretty hard time recommending these speakers. And unfortunately, the Stage 200-piece subwoofer, it isn't any better. It has almost zero finesse, and not to beat a dead horse, it reminded me a lot of the Nakamichi Dragon subwoofers. There's a lot of port noise, and the 200p is very quick to bottom out. The fight between Deadpool and Wolverine in the Void, it almost cooked the smaller JBL sub, and I wasn't even listening at blisteringly loud levels. Moreover, for a system aimed at first-time users, you still have to set the level and maybe even the crossover of the subwoofer itself, which are two steps that I consider just a little bit more advanced, especially if you're coming from a soundbar system. So what's going on? When I mentioned JBL's strategy of trying to coax soundbar users into a more traditional home theater with the new Stage 2 line and MA receivers, that wasn't a guess. That is exactly what JBL told me their goals were during our phone call. After living with their system, I'm even more confused now. The 710 receiver is so stripped down in what I assume is an attempt to make it easier to use. Its bare bones set of features makes it more challenging to use, especially if this is your first go with a traditional home theater system. I don't know, perhaps ignorance is bliss. I mean, as long as one of your well-meaning audiophile friends doesn't come over for a movie night, you may never realize that you could or should be having a better experience. So my take is this. These speakers, they feel rushed to market, and the AVRs were an afterthought at best. Appearances aside, and don't get me wrong, I really like the look of this entire series. I think it's pretty clear, though, that the MA receivers, they're not fully baked. The HDMI switching is slower than slow. CEC barely works, often allowing for just volume and power on control. The AVR is slow to respond to remote commands. The menu trees are convoluted. The JBL app is purely an access point for streaming music and allows virtually no control over the AVR, besides maybe network setup updates and power on. The phono preamp is noisy. And speaking of noise, the AVR has an audible noise floor in the form of tweeter hiss that you can hear from the JBL speakers even when sitting 10 feet away. And while I sincerely appreciate JBL's efforts to bridge the gap between soundbar customers and home theater ones, I don't see many people making the leap, at least not with this system. If a customer is willing to put the time into understanding how to set this system up, maybe some are going to be hypnotized by the sheer force of sound coming from it, kind of maybe like Dragon owners who still insist they weren't taken for a ride by Nakamichi, but beyond that, I don't think there's going to be many converts. I mean, unless we are only talking about raw volume, most soundbar type systems put the JBL combo to shame. Sonos's older Ultimate Surround system, Sony's Theater Quad with the SW5 subwoofer, hell, even Samsung's own Q990D are better. If face-melting output is the goal, the JBL system can do few things Sonos, Sony, and Samsung cannot. But for everything and everyone else, you are likely going to have a better experience with your existing soundbar setup. And if you're looking for a more traditional home theater system, I'm afraid you're going to find better value elsewhere. If you enjoy a loud and punchy sound, the stage speakers might work for you. However, if you're looking for speakers for both music and movies, I would recommend checking out ELAC's new Debut 3 series instead. They are in the same price range, but provide for a much better experience. If you're able to spend an extra $100 or so here and there, consider Q Acoustics, Polk Audio, or even Martin Logan's Foundation series. And at $800 retail, the MA710 receiver is outclassed by less expensive receivers like Onkyo's 7100, the Sony 1000, and Pioneer Elite 305. I get that they're not as sexy looking and they may have input and output options that may feel too advanced for someone coming from a soundbar, but honestly, the amount of work JBL expects users to do in order to enjoy their system properly, it's actually easier to do all of that on the competitors' products. One thing that I've learned over many years of reviewing is that you should never write off a brand even if they come out with a product that misses the mark. Even though the Stage 2 series of speakers and matching receivers are going to be a no for me, that doesn't mean I don't still love the brand. I started my home theater journey with JBL, and I'm not about to write this off as if it's the end of JBL. Like I said, I appreciate the attempt to bridge the lifestyle and traditional gap, and hopefully their next go-around will be better because that is how you stay relevant in an ever-changing world of hi-fi and home theater. That is my take on JBL's new Stage 2 speaker series and their MA line of receivers. What'd you think? Like I said in this review, I don't think we're going to do an unplugged after this. I think we're actually going to do a live next Friday where I know we're going to address some of the things we talked about here, but we'll also take other questions that may not be related to the JBL. So get all of your questions, all of your comments ready. Leave them below, save them for next Friday's live stream. But until then, if you liked this video, please do give it a thumbs up, like, and subscribe. Go ahead, ring that bell so that you're notified when new videos come out. If you use any of the links that Christy left for you down below, know that that's a great way that you've continued to show your support for this channel and the work that we both do here. And both of us, thank you very much for doing that. Follow me on Instagram at Recovering Audiophile, and that is it for me today. So remember, the only person who has to like the sound of your system is you. So happy listening, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. See you on the next video. Bye.